Liz Truss faced MPs in the House of Commons. She faces mounting pressure on her government's economic strategy, with turbulence continuing in financial markets today as well as in the House of Commons.
Yeah, well, the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, in Washington, declaring the bank will not extend its support into the markets into Friday. Reports sent from the Office of National Statistics saying that we're one step closer to recession. The latest 0.3% down in growth for the latest figures. Not looking good for the UK's economy.
We can hear now from our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. So the top line from Prime Minister's Question Time was Liz Truss insisting no cuts in public spending. Just looking at what else she might do, she cancelled Rishi Sunak's planned rise in corporation tax, which would have raised a significant amount of revenue. Do you think that could be back on the table?
Possibly, but I'd say that was the centrepiece of her going for a growth strategy. I think more likely is that she may... this is surmise. Yeah. I have no sources that I've asked about this in government. But it may be that they go for cancelling the planned reduction in the basic rate of income tax from 20 to 19%, which they brought forward to next year. Maybe that could be pushed into the future, because that is really expensive, you know. If you cut the top rate of tax, it costs you a couple of £1 billion.
About £2 billion, wasn't it?
Which is, in 900 billion of government revenue, is literally a drop in the bucket, as they say. If you cut the basic rate of income tax by a whole penny, that's more like £7 or £8 billion, because, of course, many, many more people pay the basic rate of income tax. So if she wanted to signal to the financial markets that she gets it, that she really does understand that they have to be immediately fiscally responsible, then certainly that's what I would advise her to do, to make a big sign that she is being a bit more emollient.
There are lots of people throwing bricks at the telly at your head right now, Liam,
yeah.
telling them that they're not having a tax.
Economics is tough, and governing is about choices.
I mean, it's interesting, however, that Labour have agreed with that particular cut on the base rate.
Yeah.
What they haven't agreed with is corporation tax and the freezing, if you like, for not going up to 25%. Now, could that be an area, again, where they have to move?
I think, again, if I was advising her, that is where your clear blue water is. Yeah, corporation tax, it isn't about, you know, the big businesses in the skyscrapers in the City of London, though. It's partly about that. You know, plumbers pay corporation tax. Graphic artists, designers who work from home pay corporation tax. Anyone pretty much with a small business of a size that sustains a family, if you're the main breadwinner in a family, you're likely to be paying, in most parts of the country, corporation tax. So if you ramp up corporation tax from 19% to 25%, which was the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak's proposal, that is a big increase. That is a big amount of money to remove from the incomes of many families who increasingly rely on self-employment, the gig economy, and so on. I think she's much more likely to say, we're in this together, we need to delay the reduction in the basic rate of income tax and allow Starmer to venture off into the more commercial economy.
The politics of that. I take what you said about, you know, you don't have to be like a multinational, not multinational, but you don't have to be like a massive company to pay corporate.
A chip shop will pay corporation tax, right? Run by a family.
But can you imagine saying we are going to keep the tax cuts on businesses, but we're going to remove the tax cuts on workers? I mean, the politics of that would stink, wouldn't they? The economics might not, but the politics.
OK, I don't think it's really registered with most ordinary people that they've got an basic rate of income tax cut coming, and it was going to be 2024, then it was going to be 2023, and then it was going to be 2024 again. I mean, if you actually raise the basic rate of income tax, which this is the equivalent to doing in the public finances, if you don't go ahead with a cut that you said you were going to do, it's the equivalent of raising to raise the basic rate of income tax now while you're cutting corporation tax. I agree with you. The optics of that are almost as bad, but not quite, as cutting the top rate of tax in the middle of a cost of living crisis. That would be politically tin-eared. No. But to not go through with a reduction in the basic rate of income tax that I don't think has really landed yet politically, That's different.
Now, what about the blame game? We're going to speak to
She's not convinced.
No, about many things. However,
so many things I say.
Let's talk about the blame game, because we had a Treasury committee at the Commons this morning, as well as what we saw in the Chamber. Now, Chief Economist, or UK Economist for Deutsche Bank, Sanjay Raja, said that the unfunded tax cuts was the straw that broke the camel's back. Jacob Rees-Mogg has gone public this morning saying, well, actually, no, it was the interest rate policy from the Bank of England, not raising rates quick enough and high enough to actually choke off inflation. This is not going to really help the markets when they hear this sort of internal debate between economists, the Treasury and the Bank of England.
It isn't. I think it's a combination of things. I was saying in the newsroom earlier, I had a chat with Norman Lamont yesterday evening. I had a drink with him in the House of Lords, trying to get his perspective. You know, former Chancellor, extremely knowledgeable bloke.
15% interest rates, remember?
Absolutely. This has been a very difficult day. And he said to me it's a combination of the unfunded tax cuts and the rhetoric, and he stressed the pushing away the orthodoxy rhetoric.
Right.
Look, stay with us, because we'd love to get your analysis on everything. Jacob Rees-Mogg, the business secretary, is waiting for us. That's why I interrupted you. Nobody else would make me interrupt you. Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you for joining us on GB News Day. Rishi Sunak had planned a rise in corporation tax. Liz Truss cancelled it. Will that definitely remain cancelled? It definitely, corporation tax is not going to rise.
Well, not having the rise is extremely good policy. Bear in mind that cutting corporation tax from 28% down to 19% led to about a 50% increase in corporation tax revenues and an increase in corporation tax as a percentage of GDP. So it actually provided more money to HMRC to pay for the public services that we need. So it's a policy that is beneficial for everybody. It's better for businesses and it's better for the Treasury.
Secretary of State, can I pin you down on this issue of the blame game? As I was just discussing there with Liam, the chief UK economist at Deutsche Bank, Sanjay Raja, told the Treasury Select Committee that the unfunded tax cuts were the straw that broke the camel's back. Do you accept that?
Well, I think the context that puts it into does begin to realise that the tax changes are relatively small in the context of the whole thing, that they're about 2% of GDP, and that what I was saying this morning was not a criticism of the Bank of England, but merely a recognition of economic reality, that whenever the US Federal Reserve raises rates, countries that are not raising rates as quickly will see their currencies decline in relation to the dollar. And that always happens. That isn't surprising. It's not a criticism. It recognises different economic realities in different countries, but that is what you would expect to happen. So I'm not sure straws and camels' backs is a useful or helpful cliche in these contexts. But what I would say is that the cut in taxation was not that big.
That, why didn't the government accept the OBR's offer of actually running its slide rule over the suggestions made in the mini-budget about the tax cuts and so on? If you were so confident that that was going to be OK, why didn't the OBR get the chance to go public with it?
Well, the OBR has a statutory duty to fulfil, which it will fulfil. But the ABR is run by good people. I thought Robert Choate, when he ran it, was a particularly capable economist. But even Robert, when he was running it, didn't get the forecasts right. So the idea that the ABR will actually make a forecast that turns out to be what happens isn't actually the case. It makes estimates which are well thought through and made by clever people, but economic forecasting is never that accurate.
OK. Well, politics is a complicated game too, isn't it, Business Secretary? Your colleague, the former Tory Chief Whip, warned against balancing the budget on the back of the poorest people in our country. Benefits must rise in line with prices, mustn't they?
But we haven't yet got the inflation figure on which benefits will be based. So the figure comes out in a day or two. It's always in the middle of the month following. Benefits every year are uprated in relation to what has happened in September. Some benefits are raised in line with inflation by statute. Some are raised in accordance with different principles. But no decision has been made on how benefits will be uprated. So we shouldn't jump the gun on these issues.
Now, you have indicated that perhaps the bank should have raised its rates by 0.75% instead of the 0.5% to match the United States. You obviously believe the bank should be independent, but what do you think should be happening now November the 3rd for the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting?
No, I haven't indicated that the bank should have increased interest rates by more. What I have commented on is the inevitable effect of the interest rate differential between the UK and the Federal Reserve, because I greatly respect Bank of England independence, and I think when you're talking about the stability of the system, this requires the independence to be maintained by government ministers. So I wouldn't dream of giving advice to the bank on what it should do.
OK, but let me put this to you. It would be politically inconvenient for this government if the Bank of England decides to really start ramping up rates now to choke off inflation.
The Bank of England is independent, and other central banks have gone at different rates from the UK central bank, some faster, some slower, and the Bank of England must try and calculate what is the right pace to go for the UK economy. But you have to bear in mind that the way to stop inflation is through monetary policy. Everybody knows that. That is an interest rate tool that the Bank of England is in control of, and that is the mechanism that will be used to tackle inflation and already has been used. But that's done independently and is a consequence of ordinary policy making.
OK, let me put to you the words of Kevin Holland-Rake, again, one of your members of Parliament, a Conservative member of Parliament, a member of the Treasury Select Committee. He says it would be better for Kwasi Kwarteng to U-turn on some elements of that so-called mini-budget than to spur on further market turmoil by pushing ahead regardless. Is everything in that budget, we know 45p has gone, is everything else that was introduced in that mini-budget, is it sort of there in stone, set in stone?
Well, we passed into law through its House of Commons stages the national insurance reduction yesterday, and the Socialists, the Labour Party, agreed with it. So things are already happening and are being pushed through.
Can I just return to that phrase used, the consequences of ordinary policy making? Clearly, if interest rates keep climbing and people are hurting, there may even be a housing crash, some have suggested, you're effectively voting yourselves out of power at the next general election, aren't you?
Well, you're making the case very eloquently for the fiscal policies of Kwasi Kwarteng, because what you have to do in response to the monetary tightening is have some element of fiscal loosening, which is what has been happening in other countries as well, because monetary tightening is difficult for an economy. It puts interest rates up, that puts the cost of mortgages and other borrowing up. That is hard for people, for families and for businesses. So having some amelioration on the fiscal side is getting the balance right.
Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's been good to talk to you. We thank you for your time and for joining us on GB News Day. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Marks out of 10?
It depends what you're judging on. If you're judging on kind of sartorial elegance, then maybe 11 out of 10, as Spinal Tap said. If you're judging on politics, maybe 6 or 7. Where I thought he was very sure-footed was on the Bank of England. I mean, look, Jacob Rees-Mogg, as well as being a sort of consummate commons man, he's also a very sophisticated fund manager. He set up a pretty serious finance company that nobody in politics...
He's about to make a few bob from it as well.
Nobody in politics really pays much attention to. But to do that, you need to know your way around financial markets, and he does. And he did say earlier today, when asked who was to blame for this financial turmoil, he said it may not be the mini-budget. It could just as easily be the fact that the Bank of England raised interest rates by less than the Federal Reserve the day before the mini-budget. And that's been presented as Jacob Rees-Mogg attacks the Bank of England. And so what he just did in that interview with you was he reined back from that position to say, of course it's independent. And when you invited him to say, basically, the Bank of England is going to get you unelected, he just said very straight-battedly, they have to do what they have to do. They have to be independent.
Yeah, but we do remember that Liz Truss did talk about altering the remit of the Bank of England.
During the leadership contest, she certainly did.
Yeah.
And during that leadership contest, I thought one of Rishi Sunak's best moments, certainly for economic nerds like me, was when he said, that actually really alarms me, what Liz Truss just said then. And it was alarming to do that, particularly because a lot of us could see the fact that a very painful period of interest rate adjustment was down the line. It was already happening. Mortgage rates were already much, much higher during that leadership contest than they were at the beginning of the year. But I think what Jacob Rees-Mogg tries to do there, he tried to diffuse any sense that the Bank of England and the Treasury are going to, in public anyway, go to war.
Yeah. Liam, thank you very much indeed.